Leslie, and I'm here to introduce our speaker for today. We have our speaker, and she, of course, came with a computer that we weren't able to have the white wires with, so she's going to be presenting without her computer today. But we had it all set up for her. That's how life, sometimes life just doesn't work. I am back from San Diego. Let me just tell you, the weather was perfectly miserable. It felt just like Cincinnati. It was cold, it was red, and it rained every single day. Just want you to know that it wasn't any better in San Diego. I have two nice little grandchildren, two grandsons, 10 and 8. They are lovely human beings, and they listen to me and not their parents, and that's just fine with me. Both of their parents are professional negotiators. I was a chemistry teacher. I do not take, and we're going to negotiate the number of peas. I don't do that. Okay. Oops. Here we go. So, we're going to start with a couple of announcements. I'm going to start with a naturalization ceremony that's going to be this Friday at St. Veronica School at 10 a.m. And there are only 2 of us, and there can be 3, so if somebody is interested in working with me, I will have all of the papers in a folder if you're interested for 10 o'clock this Friday morning doing a naturalization ceremony. There usually are 70 people that we register to vote. It's with the League of Women Voters, and it works very nicely, and it's a really nice experience if you haven't done it. Yes?
I went to one at St. Henry High School, and all the high school kids were there.
Wasn't that neat? And I'm sure St. Veronica's going to have their Boy Scout troop bringing out the flag, and they have the chorus sing a song, and it's really nice. It's like the whole community comes out, especially for these local ones. Okay, I want to remind you about... Of course. Then we have June 11th, it's a Sycamore Community Band. For those of you who are willing to come to an evening concert, if it's a nice evening, don't bother if it's raining. But if it's a nice evening, I have a huge picnic shelter that can take a lot of people, and bring your own supper and a folding chair, and this concert is from 7 to 9. And it's really kid-friendly. It's one of those concerts where there's a 70-piece band and they love having little children dance to their music. Oh. It's one of those concerts, and the kids love it. So bring the little ones, the grandchildren. And there's a restroom there, and everything's right there. Local. Okay, here we are. We are ready for announcements. And there it goes. There he goes. Are you ready for announcements?
Sure.
He sure he is, right here. What do you got? You got something to show us.
Oh, well, I could do that too, yeah. I've mentioned this before, but it's tonight. Roy Zimmerman's concert. Progressive Tom Lehrer for our Times. Tom Lehrer even says very nice things about Roy Zimmerman. For those of you who remember who Tom Lehrer was. All right, me too. He's also kind of a Woody Guthrie, you know, something like that. And in my introduction to him tonight, I'm going to say that there may be some progressives in the audience who might be upset with some of his secular humanist songs. And there may be some secular humanists who will be upset with his progressive songs, although I can't remember ever meeting one of those.
Not around here.
So I hope a lot of you will come, because I'm nervous about making sure we get enough people there, and I would really appreciate it.
Where is it? Where and when?
Okay, once again, it's tonight. It's in the newsletter, as Peter points out. But the concert's not actually in the newsletter. The concert's in the First Unitarian Church on Linton Avenue, which is right between Vernon Place and Reading Road, where the old Sears store used to be, and about a block from where Vernon Manor is. And it's at 7 o'clock. There is a price, which is $20, but as Roy says, or pay what you can. He's just going to open his guitar case and he's not going to look to see how much you put in. Although the more you put in, the better. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Here we go with more announcements.
Do you have the other mic? Just have one.
Take this one. I'll get it.
Oh, I thought you were, okay. I want to read you, if I might, what I wrote to the city council last night. I don't watch soccer games or any big-time sport, couldn't care less. I'm all for the fight back we're seeing against the immoral evictions. Let the Birdings, the Cranleys, the Sittenfelds not force the rest of us to support their game while they throw low-income families out on the streets. Let the councilors who want a stadium support it, not me. My taxes should go to build public housing, not take away what little we have in this rich city. Close to half people living in Cincinnati are poor, and a great many have no place to live. Yet you take our taxes for a new stadium. I'm waiting for an enormous march against poverty here. Our vicious bail system, the new slavery of mass incarceration, our homelessness, our racist schools. We gotta have a big march. It's got to be led, I feel, by our people of color. We can all support it, we can't organize it. People would not want us to, but we can throw in with it. So please encourage your African American friends to get up such a thing. Can you imagine an enormous march through downtown? Enormous. Kind of like we had about Timothy Thomas, but even bigger. That would get their attention. I said on this, this march, you'd tremble, you councilors, if you saw that. You'd decide you could do something for common people.
Thank you, Martha. Donna.
Hi, Christine Zavon has asked me to make an announcement that tomorrow is the Westside Dems meeting, and it is held at 6 o'clock at Keller's, which is a bar over on Glenmore, and Green Umbrella and the coroner is coming in to talk.
Very nice.
Yes,
Thank you.
quite a combination.
Good.
Green Umbrella and the coroner, yeah.
Other announcements?
Right here.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Mary Lofty from Glendale. Next week, the North Central Dems are having an appreciation. Hello. I'm Mary Lofty from Glendale. Next week, a week from Thursday, the North Central Dems are having an appreciation dinner for Denise Treehouse. And there's a flyer on your table if you are interested in attending. Thank you.
That's different than the spaghetti dinner, right?
Spaghetti dinner in the fall, appreciation in the spring.
Okay. Big fundraiser.
Yes.
Okay, we got it from the newsletter. Marlene.
I didn't originally have an announcement to make, but since I'm here, I am, now that I have all my signatures turned in and I will officially be on the ballot.
School board, Cincinnati School Board.
Cincinnati Public School Board this year. I haven't put down the clipboard because now I am pushing really hard to get more people to sign up for the email newsletter and to get volunteers. So I have that clipboard with me today. If anyone would be interested in signing up, I'm happy to have you.
Bring it around somewhere along the bunch today. Thank you. Other announcements? Other announcements?
Just a quickie.
Just a quickie.
Just a quickie. How many people here saw Elizabeth Warren at Bogart's? She was amazing, I thought. I hope everybody agreed.
Likable. That's the new word you have to use.
Likable.
Likable.
How about electable?
She was also like a bull, I think, which was pretty cool. That's it.
Good, thank you. Where am I going for these wonderful meetings that happen in Cincinnati, and I was in San Diego with my grandchildren. There you go. So are we ready? We are ready. Okay, we are ready for our speaker for today. Karen Morgan comes to us. She is the Human Rights Campaign. She's on the local board of governors. She's a volunteer. She works locally, and she is with the local steering committee. And she's going to tell us about how she does human rights and what they are and how we make them happen, because we really need them. Thank you very much, Karen Morgan.
Sorry that the technology failed, but that's okay. I'll just work from these slides. You guys can hear me okay, or is this?
Yeah.
Is it too loud?
No, louder.
Oh, louder. Okay. All right.
Turn it down, Alberta.
Yeah.
Don't stand in front of the speaker.
Move over.
No, I think you're okay. You're okay there. No, it's me here.
Okay. Maybe turn yours off. Okay.
It's all right.
All right, well, thanks for having me today. Again, my name's Karen Morgan. My day job, I work at GE Aviation. I didn't grow up around here, but I moved out here after college. I'm an engineer and started with GE and been working there off and on for the past 35 years. Raised a family, and Cincinnati's my home now. I also, about 8 years ago, started volunteering with the Human Rights Campaign here locally. And so what I wanted to do today, they asked me to come, and this is basically an HRC 101. But before I start, does anybody know what HRC is? I don't know what the level of knowledge is in the room. I see a couple hands.
Human Rights Campaign.
Yes, and anything else that you know about HRC in terms of what group of people it focuses on?
LGBTQ+.
LGBTQ, all right. But what I'll be doing today is giving you a kind of an HRC 101 top down, because HRC is a nationwide organization. It's the largest LGBTQ human rights or civil rights organization in the United States. It's based in Washington. And we have steering committees around the United States that actually, it's a kind of a grassroots effort within each community if they want to establish a steering committee, which we did in Cincinnati in 2005. And basically we do locally and try to do things locally based on what HRC is trying to do nationally. So what I'll do is I'll start high, and then I'll bring it down to what we're doing here in Cincinnati and some of the different events we have, and it's all volunteers here locally. So I'll step through the HRC vision, mission, goals, priorities, what the big strategy picture is, and then get down into the structure of what we do here with our local steering committee. Oops. So I'm going to start with the HRC vision. There's a few things I'll read here, because I want to make sure I'm stating it all correctly. So HRC, which stands for the Human Rights Campaign, envisions a world where lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people are embraced as full members of society, at home, at work, and in every community. So really focusing in on the rights and needs of people in the LGBTQ community. For some of us that are older, the queer term, I don't know if it is a little cringeworthy, right? But it is a reclaimed term, maybe adopted more by younger people, but it's as human beings, we tend to want to put people in boxes, right? Wherever it is, let me put you in a box, then I can judge you. But if the queer term is more of an umbrella term to say, hey, I don't want to be in a box, I need somewhere on this sexual orientation, gender identity spectrum, so I'm within this maybe not conforming to typical standards, but I don't want to put myself in one of the boxes. So I kind of like that. And so the HRC mission, well, the Human Rights Campaign and the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, and I'll talk about that some, together serve as America's largest civil rights organization working to achieve LGBTQ equality. And, you know, HRC is, like I said, headquartered in Washington, D.C., but they maybe have a couple hundred people that are on the payroll. But the way they do a lot of their work is through a huge volunteer network. Some of you may just be members because you've written a $5 or $10 check and you get the emails. And others, you can volunteer all the way up to advising, being on the board of directors and advising HRC at the national level. So I think they're an example of an organization that has maximized what they do with volunteers. It's pretty amazing. There's about, in terms of members, people that donate to HRC, 1.5 to 2 million people within the U.S. It is a U.S.-based organization, even though they are, they do have a global group within that focuses on things that are happening globally to try to raise awareness here in the United States, whether it's things going on in Chechnya or other places where human rights are being violated for LGBTQ people. So the goals, and what HRC does covers a lot of ground. I think people that have heard of HRC think of more of the political, you know, let's say marriage equality, trying to pass legislation, and that is one part of what HRC does, which is number one here in goals, achieve fair and equitable policies and practices for LGBTQ people and their families. So there is certainly a lot of focus on what's happening judicially as well as laws that can be passed and such for protections. But HRC does more than that. They have programs in schools. There's things focused on the workplace as well. And for instance, I work at GE, and one of the things that HRC has is called the Corporate Equality Index that measures Fortune 1000 companies on their LGBT policies and practices. And companies compete to see who can achieve 100 on the CEI, as it's called, for those of us in corporate America. And it's really moved the bar on LGBT policies and practices within the private sector, even over the public sector. So another one of HRC's goals is to empower, like I said, it's a huge vehicle for empowering volunteers all over the country, leveraging the work to have an international impact. So they also do focus on things really more around awareness, and I think they provide support for groups internationally. And then what I also wanted to share is HRC's top 5 priorities, which kind of gives you an idea of the breadth of the things that HRC does. Number 1, defend our progress and block new threats. Even though with the administration that's in right now, things have not been great for the LGBTQ community. We made a lot of strides in the previous administration, and a lot of that is starting to be pulled away. And a lot of it started post marriage equality, and it just has accelerated under this administration, where even, you know, at the government level, they're reinterpreting things and taking rights, potentially taking rights away. And then the whole, what we call the RFRA, the religious freedom bills, that, you know, where somebody can deny service. Now they're talking about doctors being able to deny people who would identify as LGBTQ, denying you, you know, service as a doctor because of their religious beliefs. And so it's going across the spectrum there. And a lot of like bills for, that focus on or attack the transgender community, the so-called bathroom bills. So HRC spends a lot of time, and a lot of that's at the state level. There's something going on in Texas right now, and HRC is trying to pull businesses together actually to put together an amicus brief against some of the things that are going on. Well, some of the, there's some court cases that are coming up to the Supreme Court that will, it's how do you interpret Title VII, which is about, you know, how you interpret sex. People who are LGBTQ or have used Title VII to say that sexual orientation and gender identity fall under sex, and now that's going to hit the Supreme Court here, so it's going to be very interesting because they can decide whether in fact if someone feels that they're discriminated against, you can claim it against Title VII or not. So that's going to be some important legislation. So HRC raises awareness, puts money towards supporting or trying to advocate with, in this case, with amicus briefs and things like that with the Supreme Court, but also gets involved even at the state level, helping to fight legislation that is anti-LGBT. Another top priority is electing pro-equality candidates. So again, HRC will endorse candidates based on what they, typically, of course, they're mostly Democrats, but sometimes a few Republicans, but HRC will endorse and provide money for those candidates. And then, like in our case here, for instance, they endorsed AFTAB in the last campaign, so we had money and we had resources to put on fundraisers for him and help support him locally as the HRC steering committee here. Protect the most vulnerable in our community is another priority. HRC has a program called Welcoming Schools that goes into, and actually we're talking with Cincinnati Public Schools right now as a possibility where you go into the schools and it actually educates the teachers, the facilitators. It's not it doesn't educate the students, but it's a grammar school, what we call like K through 5. It educates the administrators on how to recognize and deal with bullying, and not just LGBT, but across, whether it's gender, whether it's color, anything. It's a good training that we're trying to see if we can get put into place here at Cincinnati, as a matter of fact. Furthering legal protections, again, more of the legal side of things, and then advancing equality in workplace, schools, and communities. And I was talking about the Corporate Equality Index, which has been advancing equality in workplaces since 2002. HRC's expanded that from, they have a Corporate Equality Index, there's also a Healthcare Equality Index, or HEI, that measures hospitals and health organizations. There's a Municipal Equality Index that measures cities, and Cincinnati was one of the first cities to achieve 100, which was back in 2014, which was great. So I want to talk a bit about how HRC is structured and how does that flow down to Cincinnati and what we do here. So the Human Rights Campaign has two branches. There's the PAC, or the for-profit side that raises the money for a lot of the political work that they do. And then there's actually a not-for-profit, the foundation side, and that does all the other programming. It does things like the Corporate Equality Index, Welcoming Schools, another program, All Children, All Families, that certifies agencies that deal with like foster care, families and such, and does education around that. So it's got the two sides to it, and they're supported by a board of directors, which is the highest level of volunteers within HRC. We don't have we don't have a board of director here in Cincinnati, but there are some directors in Columbus and Cleveland. But the way it works is after HRC was formed in the early 90s, in order to further what they do, they started these steering committees, and we have 32 steering committees around the United States right now, and we have 3 in Ohio. We have 1 in Cincinnati, 1 in Columbus, 1 in Cleveland. And the way it's structured, there's the steering committee we have co-chairs, we have a group called the Board of Governors, and I'm one of the governors here locally. We have 6, and we're liaisons back to HRC National, so we go back for meetings a couple times a year, and we're expected to be local fundraisers and leaders within the group here. And then the steering committee, and I'll step through it quickly, we have a number of committees within that. The steering committee is the co-chairs of each of our subcommittees, and we've got about 7 subcommittees that do a variety of things here in Cincinnati, and like I said, we formed in 2005. So the committees that we have one committee that we call Community Engagement, and it's kind of like it sounds. That committee establishes relationships with other like-minded groups in the city. Also partners, like we partner with a couple of the transgender groups within the city to help put on Transgender Day of Visibility and Transgender Day of Remembrance. We also have an MLK Day of Service effort that we do every year with Lighthouse. So it's about partnering and with other folks other groups in the community, supporting them and them supporting us. And then we also have another committee that's what we call membership outreach, and that committee kind of puts on fun, lower cost events. They organize Pride and the Pride booths that we support all around the area. They also, like $10 to $20 kind of events. We do a Her HRC event every year for women. We do a bowling event, just kind of fun events for the community. People become members of HRC by buying a ticket and attending, and it just makes us more visible to the community. We also have our big fundraiser every year is our dinner. It's usually in the beginning of March. We had it at the Hyatt downtown this year. We usually have about 700 people. $200 price ticket, silent auction, the whole thing, but that's our big fundraiser every year. So there's a whole committee that all they do is the dinner and the auction and all that. So that's our big fundraiser. We also have what we call a workplace committee where we do education events and workshops with area businesses to help them improve policies and practices or educate them more about things going on with LGBTQ communities so they can take that back to their companies. So we're working with businesses and companies within the city. Let's see. That kind of covers a lot of what we do. We also, the community engagement also handles things like the welcoming schools and other training within the community as well. So basically what we're trying to do here locally is raise money, of course. So we're here to raise money through a lot of our events and also to raise awareness. I mean, kind of like what I'm here today, being able to get out and talk to folks in the community, let them know what work HRC is doing. I stay involved as I have for this long because I really believe in the mission and I believe in what this group is doing in terms of really furthering the rights for the LGBTQ community. I mean, I just want to live no different than anybody else. I want to have the same rights. I pay the same taxes, I just like to be treated the same, don't we all, right? And so it's in some ways too bad that we have to have all these organizations to make that happen, but that's just how it is. So it's definitely been a passion for me, not only, like I said, raising the money, but also raising awareness, getting out there and just talking to folks. So, that's kind of it at kind of a high level in terms of who we are and what we do, and wanted to see, I know some of you have not heard anything or didn't know anything about the Human Rights Campaign. It's I wish I brought some, they're the equal stickers you see on people's cars, that's HRC. So I wanted to see if people had questions really about anything, whether it's HRC or other things LGBT. Go ahead.
Wait.
Too many mics. I did not know about the Human Rights Campaign per se, but I do know that everyone thought that the Emmett Till problem was what started the equality for African Americans. Long before that, people were working behind the scenes. People think the Stonewall riots were the thing that began, the gay and lesbian, etc. Awareness. Long before that, people were working behind the scenes. And even though I didn't know what the Human Rights Campaign was, my grandson, this is what he did. He's 18. He got a full ride to Stanford, yay, 60 grand a year. Okay, last November, he was having dinner going to meet his mom and her fella for dinner. He called from the car in the parking lot and said, "Is it okay if I bring my boyfriend?" That's how we found out, because he knew in our family it would be fine. So even though I didn't know about the Human Rights Campaign, we live what we believe. And I was only one in the family that was worried was me. I'm like, you think somebody should talk to him? And my one friend said, Bernadine, he probably knows more than you do. I'm like, oh, she said, if you want to worry about somebody, worry about a trans African-American prostitute down and over the Rhine. Worry about them.
Yeah, and actually, Thank you,
Okay,
thank you. But that's
that's all.
true.
Thank
I
you.
mean, one thing, the Transgender Day of Remembrance is because so many trans people are murdered relative to the rest of the broader community every year. And trans women of color are predominantly in that group of people that are murdered every year, so, yeah.
I have two questions.
Yes.
You have a monthly meeting,
Yes.
and let me make sure I understand though. So folks used to use Title VII in order to sue, and the Supreme Court could change that. Is that what you're saying?
That's what yes, so they've agreed to hear, I think it's like 3 cases, all in terms of how Title VII can be interpreted specific to sexual orientation and gender identity. So, as you can imagine, different courts have ruled different ways, but there's a couple of cases that are coming up that I think will allow, and as you know, the Supreme Court can choose how it rules on things in terms of very narrow or very broad, but they can choose, this will give them an opportunity to rule basically whether Title VII can be used as an argument for discrimination based on sexual orientation or
Would
gender
you have a
identity.
plan B that you could use if they shut that door?
Yes, so the Plan B, good question. So the Plan B has been working for many, many years now, but it's been reintroduced to Congress. It's called the Equality Act. Anybody familiar with the Equality Act? So it used to be ENDA, I think, back 10 or 15 years ago. So basically, the Equality Act, since we have a Democratic Congress, it's been reintroduced. It won't pass under this administration. But what it does is it would insert sexual orientation and gender identity into existing civil rights laws. So the Civil Rights Law of 1964, so laws that protect certain classes of people for hiring, public accommodations, housing, credit. There may be another one, but what it would do is it wouldn't create a new law. It would insert sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes. And if it did that, you wouldn't need the lawsuits. And so, yeah, if we get a bad ruling on Title VII, the push is still, even if we get a good ruling with it, you're still litigating everything. Everything has to be litigated against that. So if we have the Equality Act in place, that makes the law of the land. So right now, interestingly, I told about Ohio, protections for LGBTQ people in those areas of employment, housing, things like that is a patchwork. So like I said, Cincinnati's got 100 on the Municipal Equality Index. So if you live within the city of Cincinnati and work within the city of Cincinnati, you're protected as an LGBTQ person. If you work for GE, my company has those protections in place. So if you work for a big company, at least for employment, I'm protected. But people in the state of Ohio, Ohio itself doesn't have any protections in place. There's a bill that's been introduced and reintroduced in the Ohio House, I think, that's also trying to do the same thing for Ohio. But basically, as you drive through this state, you literally, and drive across this country, you go in and out of whether you're protected or not from being denied housing or being fired. So in Ohio, you can still be fired for being gay or transgender and not have legal recourse unless you try to file against Title VII. So it's a patchwork right now.
The monthly meeting.
When?
Do you have a monthly meeting?
Yes, so we have a monthly steering committee meeting. It's the last Tuesday of every month from 7 to 8:30, and it's open. If people reach out, I'm actually one of the steering committee co-chairs, and if people reach out to me and say they'd like to attend, it's good to know that people are going to come. So
It's not really open.
but yeah, we like to know if we have people coming in. But yeah, it's.
So I put your email on the.
Yeah, you can. So if people want to reach out either with any questions or they're interested in attending a steering committee meeting just to see what we're doing and what events we're doing, that's great.
If the ERA was ever to become a constitutional amendment, would it not include the LGBT community?
So the Equal Rights Amendment is just women.
Just women?
Well, if you're a trans woman, I guess then you would technically, I think, fall under that, but yeah, it's not LGBT, it doesn't include sexual orientation.
Yeah, I've just been finished reading Adam Winkler's We the Corporation. He has a very interesting analysis of the Hobby Lobby case and the
Yes.
ways, I'm just wondering how many, you must have a lot of lawyers in your group. I mean, because basically what he seems to conclude is that rather than an amendment to the Constitution, that the courts are the best place to try to do it in spite of horrible people who have been put in the Supreme Court.
Exactly, so and I don't know what necessarily is the best, because you think of like marriage equality, it ended up being the courts and not like a law. So I guess, I guess maybe it depends on what you're trying to do. And I don't know that anything's permanent, because even, they talk about overturning Roe v. Wade, right? So I guess anything can be changed, any law can be undone. So I don't know that anything's permanent, is it?
One of the great ironies in that book is the progressive things like Ralph Nader gets something of law passed so you can advertise about drugs, and then corporations use it so they can do all kinds of ugly things.
Yeah.
It's a great book, though.
Is there any, or which candidate are you hoping to run against Trump in 2020?
There are people with microphones, and other people.
She's got a microphone.
You have to put it here.
Well, the question was who I would like to see running against Trump. I haven't formed an opinion yet. I'll wait and see how that huge field sorts itself out. I don't know, what do you guys think about Biden running? Oh, boy, yeah, so I'm hearing more negatives than positives there.
Mayor Pete.
But I'm sure in this room you have people all over the spectrum. I actually tend to be, I'm still trying to figure myself out. I guess we're always evolving and changing, right? I'm socially, obviously a little bit more liberal, but probably maybe in some ways I'm more towards center, I would guess, on some policies. So I would guess for me, I'd be looking for a candidate that I would feel could, I guess, speak to different aspects of the group, but isn't too extreme, let me say, to the left. I guess one of my concerns, and this is just Karen, this is not HRC, but there's things about, let's call it socialism, right? Or things about like
Medicare for all.
Climate change, healthcare for all, that I'm actually on board with. I would say, I would pay higher taxes to have, socialized healthcare, because I'm seeing that as, a huge issue. And then, I watched how much we had to pay for, like I have 3 children, to go through college, and how much debt, like my son's going into right now in medical school and things like that. And so I have a lot of friends who are Europeans through my work, and so I kind of look at that personally, and I'm like, yeah, I would rather pay more and have things a little flatter in my life than these huge swings, right, that you get, whether it's around education or healthcare. But I don't know if we're ready yet. My kids, who are millennials, seem to be, on board with that. What will be interesting, though, is as they age, and people tend to get more conservative as they start making money and don't want to give it away, will they change? They seem a little bit more social.
Some of us old people are pretty radical.
We can still be radical, right? But it's interesting, because the Democratic Party is really trying to figure a lot of that stuff out now. And like my daughter, several of my kids love Bernie. And I just, when he was running last time, I was like, I get it, and I believe in a lot of that too. I just don't. Somebody said electable, right? And I said, I don't know if he's electable. Is it that time yet? Could he have beaten Trump?
Yes, he could have.
You think?
Oh, yes, nobody knows.
When you meet with a legislator, particularly one that's maybe hostile to your agenda, how do you talk to them? What do you say to them?
So I've actually done a fair amount of lobbying. That's one of the things I do when I go back to DC a couple times a year. HRC is great about when we come in for our board meetings on Thursday, we do lobby day. So, and of course, almost everybody I'm speaking to, Shabbat, et cetera, anybody in Ohio, they're not going to be supportive. First of all, you never get to talk to them. you're talking to their staff, which is typical. But what I do, I'm not an adversarial person. I try to find common, where's the common ground, and that's what I always believe. The only way you change things is you build a relationship, you find some common ground because it's always there. But you have to build relationships because life is compromised. When I see people at either end of this thing, it's like, guys, nothing's going to get done until somebody says, let's sit down, let me get to know you, and let's talk. So
I sort of feel, I'm thinking, I lived in Europe for 9 years. And I've had in England and Holland.
Oh, okay.
One was National Health, the other one, and my children were born there. And this myth about it's going to cost me more in taxes. Well, people who are paying private insurance and don't get it through big corporations and stuff, they're paying an awful lot. And they would be paying less. But there's also a thing about, we can't do too much change. We have to come to compromise. All they're saying is, some of it is, let's go back to what we used to have. And that is now all of a sudden called socialism. Even public schools are called socialism. So I get really upset when I hear people say, well, we have to find a common ground. Who are we going to find the common ground with at this point? And also, again, I go back to the idea that Roosevelt did a lot of good things, and Democrats included, destroyed it.
Yeah, good points.
Somebody back here. This gentleman.
This will just be really quickly. Just real quick. We can find common ground with people that voted for Trump. I have found common ground with a lot of people that voted for Trump. The same things that they're worried about are the same things I'm worried about. They were just misinformed and voted not somebody in the system. I can tell you, I'm not going to say some of my best friends are Trump supporters. I'm going to tell you, I know a lot of people and I respect them and I know why they voted for Trump, because we found common ground. Read Chris Hedges, everybody. Chris Hedges.
Behind you. Thank you. I saw a hand back.
Yeah, close.
Is there a current estimate of the proportion of people that fit into one of these categories in the United States? What's numbers are we playing with now?
I think like maybe 5 to 7%. But you're saying fall into LGBTQ?
Right.
Yeah, because the estimate for people that would identify as transgender is like 0.5 to 1%, and then people who would fall under lesbian, gay, bisexual. So I think what a lot of people don't realize, and again, it's like because we like to put people in buckets, is that people who would identify as bisexual are probably a pretty big, a much bigger portion of the community than you think or people care to admit. So if you include all of that, all of those spectrums, I think conservatively, probably 5 to 7%. It might be higher. They did a study, interestingly, recently, and they were polling college students, so young people, and said, well, they were asking them about their gender identity, and did they consider themselves, basically binary, I'm male or female, or do I consider myself somewhat gender fluid? And a really high percentage, like almost half, I think it was, around 30 or 40%, identified as gender fluid. So what's going to be interesting, and this was something that HRC had done this and shared it in a recent workplace event that I was running, and the point there being is you start getting these young people graduating from college and they're coming into the workplace. Are they going to conform, or will they come in, being gender fluid or being out or whatever that means? So it will be interesting to see, but I starting to see signs of some things shifting with the younger generation.
And of course, in that group, one of the questions is, will their parents explain to them grandchildren are wonderful, and we don't like where you are, we would like some grandchildren.
Well, the thing though is that you can have grandchildren now. You can be same-sex and have children these days, so it's you can actually do that.
Did you say 1/3 are gender fluid?
It was, I'm trying to remember, and maybe it was really high. I think it was even higher than 1/3. I want to say it was close to half that were saying that they didn't maybe, and I don't know what the exact question was, and maybe the question was, do you identify with standard gender norms? So it again, as we all know, with things where you're surveying people, it's all about the question and how people interpret it.
In the back.
Yes.
Maybe it's on.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're on.
So I helped run an LGBTQ alliance with, I'm gonna trade mics. There we go.
She must have a zone, a cone of
Yes,
something around
maybe
here,
it's
right?
this. So I helped run an LGBTQ plus alliance at one of our high schools, and happy to say that we are actually going to serve as a model for other schools within CPS to
Awesome.
form their own groups. But I'm wondering if there are any programs or information that I can get to help with serving the kids, because they're really chomping at the bit to be better advocates for themselves. They feel like if no one else is going to do it, we will. So is there anything that
Are these
HRC
high school? Is it high school?
High
kids?
school, yeah.
Yeah, so HRC has, the only place HRC's really delved into, let's say, a school program is their Welcoming Schools, which trains teachers and administrators and kind of that, what I would call that primary school arena, which is a space that they saw wasn't covered by other organizations. So GLSEN, which I'm sure you're probably aware of, GLSEN is really covers the high school set. So I would, if you haven't reached out to GLSEN, and I think I have a contact person there. So if you guys are going to get my email, if you wanted to reach out to me, I could connect you with that person, and they would have a lot of materials, for the kids. And well, it sounds like, you're starting a group, so you guys already have done a lot of work. But GLSEN's probably the best. GLSEN is the best group, I think, for high school related information.
Just a quick following off of what you said. I identify as bisexual. I'm the B in LGBTQ.
There you go.
And something that I never really paid attention to until recently is there's a huge problem with bi visibility.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of prejudice, even from within my own community, the LGBTQ plus community, of, well, you're either gay or you're not.
Yeah, because even gay people want to put us all in buckets, right? It's a human thing. I completely agree with you on that.
Or we're asked to prove it. How are you supposed to prove your
Can I just love?
orientation?
Yeah, can I just love who I love? So my wife identifies as bisexual, but the reason it's invisible is because if a bisexual person's with a man, you assume they're straight, and if they're with a woman, in my case, you assume they're gay, and so you lose the B. It's invisible unless it's announced. So it is. That is. I completely agree with what you're saying.
All the time.
What's that?
Unless you travel as a trio all the time.
Well, I guess that's another way to look at it too. Yeah, it's the bisexual community they're misunderstood, and yeah, it's a challenge for them. Other questions?
Can you address the pronouns?
Yes.
Help us out.
Help us. So when I go to an HRC event, our name tag has, it'll say Karen Morgan, she, her, hers. And whenever I'm in an HRC meeting and you get up to speak, and that's what I probably should have done today, Karen Morgan, she, her, hers. And so you announce your pronouns, because people, we were talking about gender fluidity before, and people who are gender fluid use pronouns like they, them, theirs. So they would not use binary pronouns, they'll use non-binary pronouns. And there's even some other, I think most tend to gravitate to they, them, theirs, but there are even other like Z, there are other forms of a non-binary pronoun. And so especially with transgender people, and honestly probably with any of us, until you get to know somebody, you can you ask, what are your preferred pronouns is one of the especially with someone who's transgender, is one of the conversations you would have with them, and especially, and if they're going through a transition, there's at some point in time where they'll probably be changing those pronouns. But it is something I'm seeing even in companies starting to use that more. And, you know, on that topic of gender identity and binary or non-binary, companies are actually starting to move towards where you can identify as one gender or another or neither. So there are groups that are starting to move into that non-binary space, because the workshop, the half-day workshop we did recently was about non-binary in the workplace, because it's one of the kind of the newest sort of things that companies will be facing, and what do you do with all your forms and that sort of thing. So yeah.
I've just forgotten, but what's cisgender?
Oh, cisgender, yeah. So so transgender would be somebody whose gender identity does not align with your parts, basically, with your sex. Cisgender means your gender identity does align with yours. So if I'm a woman and I identify as a woman, I'm CIS, I think it's Latin, cis meaning same. Yeah, so it's same gender. So those of us that would align, our gender identity aligns with what we are physically, are cisgender.
I think it's really been cool with the Pride Parade,
Yeah.
seeing all the corporate groups together.
Yes.
And how'd that happen? And it seems like it's growing, and it's really neat. It's really neat that all those P&G folks are walking together.
There's a ton of them.
I know, whatever.
Yeah, so what that is most big corporations have what we call ERGs, employee resource groups, affinity groups. So they'll have a women, like at GE we have, I don't know, 10 of them now. So we have a women's network, African American forum, Hispanic, and GLBT. And so for Pride, what's happening is the employee resource groups, the GLBT employee resource groups of these companies are organizing people to march. So GE marches, Macy's, Fifth Third, P&G, all the big companies march, but it's usually their GLBT employee resource group that's organizing.
Seems like the numbers are growing too.
Yeah, the Pride
Who are
Parade,
marching.
we started going in 2003 when it was in down Ludlow Avenue, and it was small. And now you wait an hour for your turn to start marching in the parade, so it's all good.
I think one of the best contributions of Bernie's in the campaign was to introduce the discourse of rights, that everybody now is willing to say healthcare is a right. And I'm wondering to what extent your group elaborates on the notion of rights, because it's something, if you know about the civil rights movement, you know it's something you have to fight for. It's not automatic, and yet it has a status of feeling inherent in some crucial way. I mean, I think it's worth elaborating a bit more. I mean, I think, there should be, if you read the Cuban Constitution, you have a right to housing, you have a right to adequate athletic equipment, all kinds of things. And I think it's a great concept to elaborate on, and it seems central to your group, but I'm just wondering if you have some sense of what's particular about that value of that concept of rights.
Well, I think that the Human Rights Campaign, such as it is, the R of Human Rights Campaign, I mean, the whole mission and vision of HRC is that people who would identify as LGBTQ+ would have the same rights, no more, no less, but the same rights as everybody else. And I guess, whatever our Constitution said, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I think as humans, we feel like, it's part of how we value ourselves. And I think that one of the issues with, what I see with mental health and other issues in the LGBT community, you think of instances of suicide, drug addiction, alcoholism, a lot of things hit our community higher, and I think part of it might be that sense of I'm not the same, I'm not equal, I'm somehow less. And as humans, we don't like to feel less, and I think as a human being, you want to feel validated and respected. But, we have a couple of...
Only one microphone.
What?
Okay, and then we'll pass the microphone over here.
Okay, great. What's wrong with the term person? I mean, just person. I mean, can't we just
Shouldn't it
sort
just
of,
be that?
can't we just, and what's wrong with the term human? Or, well, that's got man in it, so we don't want that. We want it spelled M-Y.
Person has son in it. Person has.
Well, that's not, that's, human is derived as a man. Person is not. What's, I mean, why, just saying.
I hear you. We're all persons, humans. It would be nice if we all just treated each other with dignity and respect, but that doesn't happen. Which, yeah, don't always treat us with dignity and respect, do they? Yes, sir.
My name is Tommy, and a lot of people are more supportive of gay rights and other transgenders, etc., because they know people who are gay. More
Yes.
gay people have come out in the last 20 years than ever before. And so, in line with that, I'd like for all my colleagues and friends here, members of this group, to know that I am gay, I'm queer, and I was born before Stonewall. It was very difficult, very difficult. I so much wanted to not let anybody know that I was, and I'm still dealing with that today. So just to say that what your comments just a minute ago related to that, less than. Do feel less? I've always felt less than, and so it's just something I've had to work on, and I think it's so wonderful that gay people now are less likely to have to deal with that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy.
We have some in the back of the room too after.
I'm fascinated with the corporate world in some very real sense being a leader in a lot of social policy, especially since the government doesn't feel like doing anything of that sort. Is there anything that you're pushing to try to get more of the corporate world to help out in making for some more equality?
Yeah, so good question. One of the things that HRC does, so because of the Corporate Equality Index, HRC has some great relationships with some pretty influential companies in this country, and they've actually started to lean into that. I'm actually on a business advisory council and with my GE hat with HRC, but what HRC is doing is actually they leverage. So the thing about companies, and the reason why companies are kind of ahead of the game, is they're trying to attract the best and brightest talent. And they want all that talent to come in. It's the money, right? And so what happens, like I remember, when the state of New York was, going through their vote around gay marriage, they brought the companies in to say, this is good for business. And so, and now with this, the amicus brief that they're putting together for this, the Supreme Court Title VII thing, they're bringing in companies to sign on to that. And they've got like GE and other companies have signed on to the Equality Act. So it's companies telling Congress, telling our Supreme Court that fairness is good for business and good for money. So that's where companies really, legislators, people will listen, like they might not listen to the HRCs of the world, the gay rights group out there saying, give us equality, but they might listen to a GE or a Procter & Gamble. So HRC definitely leverages that. Yes, sir.
So 2 quick questions. One, with the Healthcare Equality Index, I actually discovered that maybe 6 months ago or something like that. My healthcare provider is one that, at least at that point in time, hadn't even participated in the survey. I'm assuming I can read something into the fact that they haven't participated in it.
Are they religious?
Yes.
Yeah, we've approached, I know there's a couple of, I think is it Mercy? Some of the Catholic run hospitals, won't participate. But sometimes, and to be fair, some of them we haven't really approached. Maybe if we haven't approached and really asked them, we still need to do that. But it's basically what the HEI measures is. I think it focuses a lot on the patients and how you're caring for the patients and doing some educating so that the nurses and doctors know how to deal with, let's say, transgender patients or things like that.
And the other one was, do you know how Leila's laws have been progressing throughout Ohio and more generally the country? I know Cincinnati passed a conversion therapy ban.
Correct.
soon after that. But do you know
Yeah.
if it's gotten past like major metropolitan areas or where we are in Ohio right now?
I know I remember them talking about it at the Ohio, in the Ohio legislature. But I don't know, I don't think it's like gone through at the state level. But there are a lot of states that are trying to put those bans in place. And HRC sends me a legislative update every week, and I usually see some of those in there where conversion therapy bans are going into place. But yeah, similar to LGBT rights in general, it is a bit of a patchwork right now. So yeah, I don't know all the details about that.
This may seem like a really strange question, but not from me, but it's a coming thing, I think. And you're the human rights campaign, but have you considered alliances or looked at non-human rights?
So animal rights, I don't believe they have. They really focus just on humans and on LGBTQ humans.
Sure.
Specifically, but I get your point. We're all one family, whether we're human or.
So it's not really been thought about, but it might
No.
be. I don't expect you to expand to include that, but maybe alliances and things.
And it's not just animals; it's plants and everything. I think one of my biggest concern is the planet. That we're not going to have a planet to pass on to. I just had my first grandchild born a month ago, and I'm like, what world is he going to have when he's my age? I'm scared. So, no.
I just want to mention that my son graduated Caltech in '98, and he had two choices when he went to Seattle, and it was because he had come out as gay, and it was Boeing or Microsoft. And he's still working for Microsoft, and he gets health benefits for anybody who lives with him. Anybody. It's really nice the way they have opened up this community to him, to my son.
Yes.
It's amazing to see how far it has come through my son. I want to mention when he went to a parade once, and he was marching with Microsoft people, and he was saying, "We're here, we're queer, we're Microsoft engineer."
And Microsoft has always been, I think one of the early ones to get the 100 on the Corporate Equality Index. They're great.
They had some really weird people living there. I've met some, and they're really odd people. Listen, you have been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming today.
Wonderful questions.
Thank you so much for coming. We have a wonderful speaker coming in for us for next week. Cam Hardy with the Better Bus Coalition. Anyone who's on that, Jim?
I will certainly be here, and I will introduce Cam.
He will introduce Cam. We have a person who rides the bus.
They have some great ideas and plans. They really do.
That's good. So we have a great week coming. Thank you so much for coming. You have great questions. Thank you for being here.